Hey, my name's Kevin. From 2007 to 2014, I played online poker tournaments professionally. In 2008, I was 5th on the PokerStars yearly tournament leaderboard. I also won a few weekly tournament leaderboards, which allowed me to play a PokerStars Pro for some free cash. On April 15th, 2011, my life changed dramatically. The United States government effectively shut down online poker in the US. Cash outs were suspended, and everybody was left in limbo, wondering what was going to happen next. About 90% of the money I had to my name was seized. I remember logging into PokerStars that first time, seeing that DOJ notice and thinking, this can't be real. But as the days went on, I realized that this is not going to blow over. Thankfully, the money in PokerStars would make it back to me in about 2 weeks, but the money in Full Tilt, that took another 4.5 years. Over the next couple years, I moved back in with my parents and I ate through my savings. Not the best life decision I've ever made. Eventually, I had to get a job, so what better thing to do than deal some poker? At the time, the only thing that was legal in New Hampshire was 2-4 limit poker, which that game is a drag. I made it maybe 9 months before I said, this ain't for me. I packed my bags and moved out of the country so I could play online poker again. That was one of the best decisions I made. I met a lot of great people, learned a ton, and I gained this new sense of independence and freedom. I also met a girl. She slowly started to gain importance in my life, and eventually she overtook poker as my main priority. So I moved back home to be with her. That girl is now my wife, and we have 2 beautiful kids together. But for the last 10 years, poker's been on hold, and I'm really looking to get back into it. So here's the deal. To be properly bankrolled for live tournaments, you need at least $100K minimum. I got 3. So here's the plan. We're going to turn that 3 into 25.
What's up, guys? Just got to the brook. First time here. Let's go check it out.
Walking into the brook was exciting. You can immediately feel the energy when you walk through those doors. I sit down with $300 at 1-2 and we get things rolling. We folded for a couple orbits and we get a playable hand in the big blind. The straddle's on to 5, under the gun makes the call, and we look down at pocket queens. Definitely going to come in for a raise here. We channel our inner Paul McGrill and make it 22. RIP. Straddler folds and under the gun makes the call. Going heads up to a flop of 10-10-3 rainbow. This is a good safe flop for us. He's not really going to connect with this board except for maybe a suited 9-10, Jack-10, things like that. Pocket 3s. Other than that, there's going to be a lot of garbage hands in there. King-Jack, 7-8 suited, Ace-5, all these types of hands that just don't connect at all with this flop. So for that reason, I think the best route here is to check, throw him a little rope, let him hang himself, maybe get him to bluff, and also allow him to maybe catch up on a later street. So we start with a check. Our opponent doesn't take the bait and he quickly checks behind. Now this is about the worst turn card we could have asked for. If he does have a hand like Ace-5, now he's ahead of us. We also raised pre-flop, so he's going to think that we have an ace. So it's going to be tough to get value from any hands that we're beating. So again, I think the best decision here is to check. This time he throws out a bet of 25, and I'm not sure if I'm actually ahead anymore. So we have to play this one cautiously. Hopefully he's bluffing, and we're just going to call this bet. The only thing that we're doing is bluff catching and pot controlling at this point. This is actually the best river we could have asked for, besides a queen, obviously. Flush draw doesn't get there. It makes it a lot less likely that he's got an ace. If he did somehow have a 10, now he's going to be a little bit worried that we might have an ace. Also, if he has a hand like pocket 4s, 5s, 6, 7, 8, 9, his hand just got counterfeited, so he no longer has showdown value. So his only way to win this pot could be to bluff at it. The only hands that we might get called from now are a hand like King Jack, and I think there's way more hands that he's going to want to turn into a bluff than will call a bet. So for that reason, again, we're going to proceed with a check. He doesn't take the bait this time and quickly checks behind. Says he's got 8 high, so we had him drawing dead on the turn unless he did have 8-7 of diamonds or something like that. First hand of the night that we're playing, we're scooping in a nice little pot. Something that almost never happens in 1-2, it folds to us on the button, and we pick up a pretty premium hand for that position. We're going to open for 10. Small blind folds and big blind makes the call, so we're going heads up to a flop. Pretty safe looking board for us. We've got a few backdoor draws. It's not a flop that's going to hit our opponent very hard either. All of these improve our hand by either adding a pair or some kind of draw. So we've got lots of cards on the turn that are going to help us, and we could even make the best hand by the river. So we're going to continue with a bet. We don't need to bet big here. If he missed this flop, he's most likely just going to fold to any amount, so we make it 10. He quickly makes the call, and at this point, I'm not really too worried. We've got a lot of cards that can improve our hand. Big blind checks, and this is one of those cards that we were hoping for. We now have about 14 outs, assuming that all of our club outs are good and that he might just have any random 10 hand that does not have a queen or a king in it. So we're going to continue betting here, hoping that we either catch one of those cards or we can get him to fold. So after he checks, we do just that and put out a bet of 25. I don't love how fast he makes the call because that kind of leans toward having a 10 or a hand that he does not want to fold. So if I want to win this pot, I might have to go pretty big on the river, especially with a river that bricks as hard as this one. So after he checks to us, I don't think that he's necessarily that strong, and there's only one way to find out. So we load up the guns and we fire out 75. Thankfully, as quickly as he was calling me, he makes the fold, and we scoop a nice little pot again. I was so nervous right here, I actually passed my turtle to the dealer instead of my cards. I felt like a complete rookie. But hey, it's going to take a little while to shake the rust off. After scooping a nice couple pots, we haven't really played many hands. We've won both of the hands that we've played. We see a couple people limp before us, and with pocket sixes, we're going to want to start building this pot just in case we hit our set. So we raise it up to 12. Everybody folds back to the original limpers, who both make the call. Flop comes down Jack 5-4, all hearts. We've got no heart, but we're probably still good. We've got second pair. The Jack is not really a card that's going to hit our opponent's ranges too much, but when our second limper fires into us, it's a little bit of a cause for concern. His sizing is not big, so I'm not too worried about him having too strong of a hand, and I think there could be an argument for raising here, but I'm going to proceed with caution with a player behind, and I'm going to make the call and see what he does on the turn. This is a great card for us, gives us a straight draw. We've still got better than second pair, and he fires out another quarter-size bet. I don't think this is a very strong bet, and I think we could make one of two plays. We can call and see a river, or we can raise because we think that our hand is good and we want to protect it a little bit, and he's shown a couple bets that are both weak bets, so he might just fold to some pressure here. We go for the more conservative route and safe route, I guess, depending on who you ask, and we just make the call. With this river card and him checking, I think this is a mandatory bet. And the reason being is because we do not have a heart. And we don't want to get to showdown and have him have like 5-6 with the 6 of hearts, because he's going to fold to a bet. We had raised pre-flop. We showed that we had a good hand. We've called on multiple streets. And now when that 4th heart comes out, he's slowed down from his small betting and checked. So he is probably going to be folding this river a lot of the time. And I don't want to risk him having a small heart that we lose to. We want to act like we have, maybe the king or the queen of hearts, something that we're just looking for a little bit of value from, but not going too crazy at the same time. We decide on a bet of 40, and he quickly folds. Everything seems to be working out so far, and we scoop a nice little pot again. Next playable hand we get, we're in the low jack. We pick up pocket 10s, it's folded to us. We make it a standard raise of 10. Opponent on our immediate left makes the call. He's an older guy, about $150 in his stack. Cutoff also makes the call, and then everybody else folds, so we're going 3 ways to a flop. Flop is great for us. We pick up a straight draw. There's no overcards to our 10s. This is a flop that if we were deeper, I might consider just check calling, but with these stack sizes, I'm going to continue betting because we can get value from some hands that will call this board, and it's unlikely that someone's going to be playing 10-7 or 5-7. So for a lot of reasons, we're going to continue betting this hand with the stack sizes where they're at. My feeling at the time was that if I throw out a small bet, somebody might play back at me thinking I have 2 overcards and I'm just trying to see a free turn. So that's what I decided on, and see if somebody wants to take the bait. My buddy to my left obliges and makes it 27. This raise size is pretty weak. Most people with a set are going to be raising fairly large on this board texture because there's a lot of scare cards that can come. If I just call this bet and I check the turn, he's going to check behind a lot and get a free river card. So I don't want that to happen. So I'm just going to push the action right now because I think I have the best hand. And if he is chasing a draw of some sort, let's get it all in now and see where the chips fall. He says, okay, let's do it. Board runs out. Don't love the jack. He rolls over 6-7 of spades. We are still good. And we scoop a nice pot. Seems like it's one of those nights where everything just goes in our favor. Hopefully it stays that way. This hand we get about everybody except for 2 players limping into the pot. We've got queen 4 suited, so not decent enough to raise, but definitely a good hand to have multi-ways. With the flop coming queen high, I think my queen's going to be good a decent percentage of the time, but I don't want to start putting money into this pot because I don't want to build it too large. There's a lot of cards that can come on the turn that really hurt us, and a lot of the hands that people do limp, they're going to have a queen out kicked. It's going to be tough to know where we're at if we get 2 or 3 callers. So for all these reasons, I would rather play a little pot control, and if it checks around, then I think we've likely got the best hand. It does check around, and we see the board pair on the turn. There's now 2 flush draws out there. Now we're behind any 8. But I think that our hand is good enough to bet here, get some value from a 10, maybe a flush draw or a straight draw. So we go ahead and bet out 10. Under the gun makes the call, low jack makes the call, and hijack raises to 40. At this point, I think we've gotten our information, and we're probably dead to a queen. He's probably got at least an 8, so this is an easy fold at this point. Now, I'm going to continue the video here because what happens is pretty interesting. Under the gun makes the call, low jack ends up folding, and on the 10 of diamonds river, under the gun shoves for his last $57, and the hijack goes into the tank for about 4 minutes. He finally makes the call. Under the gun shows a straight. The hijack mucks his cards, but then realizes that he has a boat and turns over 8-6 offsuit. And that's going to be good enough to scoop this pot. Starting off this hand, we're under the gun. There was a player that went to the bathroom, so he's got his dead big blind, dead small in there. So we're going to make a little bit larger of a raise here and go up to 12. Everybody folds around to the big blind, who then makes it 30. He's probably in his late 20s. He said it was one of his first times playing in a casino, although I don't know if I really believe him or not because he seemed to be pretty experienced as far as being very aggressive pre-flop and then keeping that aggression on post-flop. He saw my camera at the table and we talked about who our favorite streamers are. With all that being said, with how deep we are, I want to proceed with a little bit of caution. I really don't want to get into a 5-bet pot here with ace king being, 250 big blinds deep. I'm going to kind of disguise my hand by just calling as well. So if he's 3-betting a hand like ace queen, ace jack, I can win a lot of money if we do hit our ace. So for that reason, I'm just going to make the call here and see what happens. Flop comes down 10 high with 2 spades. It's not a board that's going to hit either of us very hard. I think he's going to be checking this flop fairly often, and I'm okay to check the behind and just keep this pot a little small, try to get to showdown because I think our hand is probably still good. 5 of spades rolls off on the turn, and it's not a great card, but it is a card that's going to probably entice him to bet more often than check. If he does have a spade, I see him betting this quite a lot. If he's got 2 spades, he probably would have bet on the flop. So this bet here seems to me like it's going to be a flush draw a lot of the time, and I can beat a flush draw at this point. So for that reason, I'm not ready to give up quite yet, and we're going to make the call. I don't love seeing the jack on the river. Ace jack is definitely part of his 3-bet range pre-flop, same with king jack. However, I don't believe that a jack would be betting this river this size on this board texture. I think they're going to be going for a smaller value bet. This bet is going to be weighted much more toward flushes, maybe a set, or nothing at all. The problem with calling, he could have a hand like ace 4, ace 5 that he's deciding to turn into a bluff. So if we do call, we could be right that he's bluffing, but he could have turned a hand better than ours into a bluff, thinking that he could not beat what we had. So anyway, long story short, if you always fold river bets, you do not learn what your opponents actually have. And I do not mind paying for information that I can then use later. I don't really know too much about this player other than what I've already discussed, and there's nothing more valuable than the cold hard facts. And when you actually see the cards that people are playing and how they're playing those cards, that is more valuable than the chips that you're putting in the middle. Just for the content. After about a minute of going through this hand, thinking about everything that happened, I decided to make the hero call and see what he's got.
Good call.
I've definitely made some hero calls in my past and then turned over my cards only to find that he had just bottom pair or a pair of deuces and his nothing was better than my nothing. So we let him turn over his cards. He shows us ace queen and we show him the ace king and he congratulates us on a great call.
Wow, really good call. Damn. Hold on. That's a crazy call. Holy shit.
We're in the big blind. We've got 3 limpers ahead of us. We look down at pocket tens. Definitely going to try to thin this field out a bit because our hand plays much better heads up than it does multi-way. Being in the big blind after so many limpers, you do need to make it quite a bit larger than you would if you were just coming in for a normal raise. So we decide on 17. We make a believer out of nobody and everybody makes the call. The 10 in the window is pretty exciting for us. We should be able to get some value from a king, a queen, a jack, maybe even an ace. We're almost sure we have the best hand now, so we're going to push that advantage and put out a bet. We continue the aggression with a bet of 45, and almost immediately everybody folds, but hey, a win is a win. We'll take it. Here we've got quite a lot of action before us. 3 people limp into the pot, and the same opponent that had the ace queen when I called him down with the ace king, he makes it 10 to go. I've seen him do this raise sizing quite a bit over limpers, so I think maybe that's a little bit of a leak and a tell of his that he doesn't raise large enough after limpers. This might be a good spot to try and take advantage of that. I decide to raise this up to 35. This raise might get through sometimes, but I think that the majority of his range is still going to continue, so his call does not really worry me, and I'm interested to see what this flop brings. We flop pretty well, and versus most opponents, I would say this is a pretty decent check back hand because we've got top pair with no kicker. However, versus this opponent, I specifically thought that if I made a pretty small bet, he might want to play back at me and, raise with his complete air hands. So that's what I decided to do because I thought it would make the most money in the long run. Showing his live inexperience, he makes a string raise to $60. What a string raise is, if you're not familiar, is when you make 2 actions to make a raise. So a lot of times in movies, they'll say, I call you and raise. That's a string raise because you're making 2 actions. You're saying call and then raise. The reason why it's called a string raise or why it's not legal is because you can say call and then get some kind of information from your opponent, like they might sigh or, show some kind of discontent that you're calling, and then you say raise. That's what a string raise is. The dealer didn't happen to catch it. I decided to just not say anything, not for the sense of being greedy, but because I didn't think that this player had bad intentions behind it. I thought that it was just an honest mistake, and his intentions were to raise, so we can roll with that. If he does have air, I want him to continue, and if I raise, he's probably just going to fold. I think an argument could be made to get it in here. Felt like calling was the best play, so that's what I decided on, and we're going to see a turn. This turn seems pretty safe. After he checks it over to us, I think that it's more than likely we have the best hand. He's got about a pot-sized bet left, so we decide to shove.
Call.
So now I'm thinking that we're definitely drawing dead, but we actually have some clean outs. Unfortunately, we miss all those outs, and he scoops a big one, getting us back for that ace-king. Some guy makes it 11. 2 people call. We're next on the button. We've got pocket deuces. Shout out Paul McGrill, RIP. This is definitely not a hand we're going to be missing. Let's see a flop. Everybody is in this pot, and we're going 7 ways to a flop. True 1-2 style. Flop comes gin, deuce, king, queen. Wait a second. How is the deuce of diamonds on the board when we've got it in our hand? Damn it, that's a 3, not a 2. Easy check fold. Folds to us in the cutoff. We've got a primo hand, ace queen suited. Gonna bump it up to 10. Big blind nonchalantly makes the call, and we're going heads up to a flop. This time the flop comes gin, and we flop the nuts. Only problem about flopping this hard is that it's going to be hard for him to have anything because we've got everything. We're going to start off with a check, let him hopefully catch up. He takes the bait and leads out with a bet of 15. He's got about 150 behind, so we're going to try to get this all in the middle. Hopefully he's got a hand that can call us. We're going to raise it up a little bit, make it 45. He thinks about it for quite a while and eventually makes the call. River card completes the flush, so that's a good thing. He leads out with a bet of $30. Now, this seems like a pretty obvious blocker bet. Doesn't want to get raised, just wants to see a cheap showdown. We all know that ain't happening. Sorry, buddy. It's going to cost you everything to see my cards.
Calling.
He calls pretty quickly, asks us if we have ace-queen. We give him the bad news, and he shows us his ace-king. Pretty unlucky for him. The outcome would have been the same if the cards were reversed, so I don't fault him for losing his stack here. Definitely just a bad beat that works in our favor. Next playable hand we get, we're in the small blind. The $5 straddle is on. Under the gun +1 makes the call. Low jack makes the call. We pick up ace-10 offsuit. You can make an argument for raising here because our hand does play better heads up. However, we are in the small blind, so we are going to be acting first on every street, so we're going to be out of position for this entire hand no matter who we're playing against. For that reason, I just decide to make the call. Flop is great for us. This is definitely a hand that's going to be in our leading range, especially with the pre-flop action. People are not going to be putting us on as strong of a hand as we have. So we're going to lead out with a bet of about 2/3 pot. We get one caller, and we're not too worried at this point. It's going to have a lot of hands like King Jack, Queen Jack, Jack 8, 7 8, maybe 8 9, Jack 9, Queen 9, King 9, maybe some Ace 3s, hands of that nature. With this turn card, we're still figured to be ahead, so we're going to continue the aggression. He pretty quickly calls, and the river is a 3 of hearts. This river card seems pretty safe for us to bet. He hasn't shown any aggression so far, so we're likely to still have the best hand. I could make an argument for checking here to have him bluff hands like miss straight draws. However, I think that if he's got a 9 or a 10, he's going to pay off a bet here. I decide on a sizing of about half pot, and he quickly says the words that I do not want to hear. Now this is an easy fold because nobody bluff shoves the river, right? Let's go down the rabbit hole with this one. It's $270 for me to call to win a pot of $755. That means I need to win this pot 36% of the time or more to be a profitable call. Now you may say, there is no way that he's bluffing here over 36% of the time. But he doesn't have to, and let me show you why. Let's start by constructing his value range. These are the hands that may jam the river. However, we have to remove the ones that may not even make it there. When constructing your opponent's range, you have to subtract the cards already in play. For example, there's only one combination of pocket 3s left because the 3 of hearts and the 3 of diamonds are already on the board, and the 3 of clubs and the 3 of spades are the only 3s left remaining, and you can extrapolate that for the rest of the hands here on the screen. However, this doesn't tell the whole story. We need to think about how he's going to actually play those hands, and he limped in after another person had limped in. Pocket 10s, I think, is very likely to raise pre-flop or on the flop or on the turn. Same with pocket 9s. Pocket deuces, I don't think they always call the flop, so I'm going to take that out sometimes. 10-3 and 9-3, same thing. And then 3-5 and 4-3, I just don't think are strong enough to make a full jam here. I think they're going to raise a little bit smaller, so we're going to weight those a little bit less of shoving. And also, let's remove pocket 3s because he's never instantly jamming quads on the river. That gives our total frequency-adjusted value range of 8.75. Now let's do the same thing for his bluff range. These are all the total combinations that I would expect him to have, and say how often is he actually going to make it to the river with those hands. His value range plus his bluff range equals his total range. His value range makes up 10% of his total range, and his bluff range makes up 90% of his total range. Earlier, we discovered that we can lose this hand 64% of the time to be break even. So we take 8.75, divide it by 64%, and that gives us 13.62. We take 13.62 minus our value range, and that gives us his bluff range. So he needs to have 4.87 bluffs in order for us to be break even. Now we take that 4.87, divide it into his total bluffing range, and that gives us 6%. which means he only needs to turn his hand into a bluff 6% of the time for this to be a break-even call. Quite a big difference from 36%. If you found this useful and you want to see more, click that like and subscribe button. This was my favorite hand to review, and looking back at this, I really hate how I instantly decided to fold this hand. You can tell by the way that I pick up my cards that I am just thinking there's no way that he's going to shove this river as a bluff, because hardly anybody does, and that was my initial instinct that clicked in almost immediately. But after analyzing the hand, I really wish that I took more time at the table, tried to get some information from him, asked for an actual count, tried to get some kind of physical tell off of him, because it's really hard to have a value hand in this situation, the way that the hand played out. After putting this in the blender, I think calling was the right play. What are your thoughts? Leave them in the comments below. I'd love to see them. This hand, we've got a new player on our right. The player that was on our right, they actually moved to our left and specifically said it's to get position on me. The new player on our right, he is about the same age as the player that was on the left, seems to be pretty competent, is raising first in, making a lot of 3-bets, and seem to be playing a lot of pots. We pick up pocket 10s. We're definitely going to be 3-betting, trying to isolate. We've got a premium hand. Everybody folds to him, and he makes the call. Not a great flop for us. We do have a backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, but with 2 overcards to our hand, I think having decent amount of showdown value and these backdoor draws, it's a good board to check behind on, but we decide to make a small bet. This is a board that a c-bet is going to take down the pot a lot, and I didn't really want to face aggression on later streets if we did check behind, so I decided to make a bet, which he does call, so not great news for us. 5 of spades seems pretty safe. With him calling a flop bet, I don't think that we can really bet the turn here for value. Only hand that we're going to beat is a flush draw or a straight draw, so we're just going to check behind. Interesting river card. I did not like the jack just because so many more hands got there that now beat me. He leads out for 65. I think with his raising range, he does have an ace, so he can easily have us beat here. We do block the nuts pretty hard. It's going to be very difficult for him to have king 10, but I just don't have the stones to be putting in $500 on a bluff right here, right now. So we're going to take the easy route out, and we're just going to let this one go. Under the gun comes right out the gate, making it $12 in this hand. We look down at pocket 4s. Great hand to set mine. Hopefully get in a multi-way pot, hit a 4, and scoop a large one. Folds around to the small blind, who also makes the call. Pretty good stack sizes going into this 3-way pot. Flop comes down pretty safe looking for us. We do have an underpair, but it's unlikely to be connected with either of our opponent's cards. So when it checks to us, I think we're pretty safe here to make a bet. We fire out a bet of 20, and the small blind immediately makes the call. Turn is about the scariest card we could ask for, and the small blind checks it over to us. We're not likely to have the best hand, seeing that he called on the flop, so he probably has some type of pair, maybe a straight at this point, maybe a flush. Because we don't like to check and give up, and seeing that the only way that we might be able to win this pot is to bet, we're going to choose the latter. Turns out there was never any chance we were going to win this pot. He throws out a big raise, and that pretty much tells us what we're going to do next. The competent player to our immediate right comes in for his standard raise size of 15. We look down at pocket 3s, and this is definitely a hand that we're going to want to see a flop with. We decide to make the call. Everybody else makes the fold, and we go heads up to a flop of 2, 4, 5. Great flop for our hand. We block the nuts. We've got an open-end straight draw plus a pair, and he leads out for 15. I think you can probably make an argument for raising, but we're just going to play it cautious and make the call. Turn card's not great for us. King's going to hit his raising range pretty hard. I do know that he knows that also, and when he picks this sizing, I think it's less likely to be a king than to be a king, and more likely to be a hand like ace queen, ace jack, even hands like queen jack, jack 10, all these hands that he's not going to want to give up on this card because it's such a great card for his range. But I think that his range is also a lot wider than it should be, so that's the reason why this card doesn't scare me, along with his bet size. So we're going to continue with the call because I think our hand is still good, and we still do have 8 outs to a pretty clean straight. River's the gin card for us. If he did have a hand like ace queen, ace jack, he's now got top pair and we've got a straight. After he checks, we're just trying to figure out how much we can get out of him at this point. If he's going to call a bet here, it doesn't really matter too much the size, so I'm going to go on the larger side. I think I could have even made it larger than I did, but I went with a bet of 75. He makes the quick call and we show him the bad news and he mucks his hand. We pick up ace 10 offsuit. Onto the gun +1. It's a little loose for a raise, but table's pretty weak, so I think we can make an argument for opening here. Plus, we're a little bit bored, so hey, why not? Folds around to the big blind who makes the fold. That's right, we just raise and take the blinds. All right, the low jack comes in for 10, cutoff to our right calls, and we look down at ace king suited on the button. It's a dream spot because we've got a premium hand, plus it's suited in the best suit. I decide on a size of 40. Small blind comes out of nowhere and says, yep, that sounds good to me. Original raiser folds and the cutoff getting about 3-1. I don't think he's ever folding anything that he has here, so he makes the call as well, and we go 3 ways to a flop. Flop comes a bunch of dirt. We've got a little bit of possibility, some backdoors, but overall not a great flop. The small blind, I'm going to weight him a lot toward something like 8s through jacks. Maybe he's got some ace queens in there, but I really don't expect him to have that very often. Facing a raise and a call and a 3-bet, ace queen should be a fold or a 4-bet. It shouldn't really be a call. It's not a good hand to be playing multi-ways with. So again, we're playing with weaker opponents here, so we don't think that they're going to know the best way to play every hand, and who's to say that that really is the best way to play the hand? We're all just making it up as we go. Anyway, the cutoff, I think his range is going to be very, very wide. He originally called a $10 bet, and then when it was back to him, he was getting about 3-1, so he's almost never going to fold a hand that he called an original raise with. Now, the sizing I went with, about a quarter pot, I felt like this was the best bet size for me to set something up on the turn or river. Both of them end up making the call. I think that the small blind can still definitely have his pairs, and the cutoff, his range can still be extremely wide because, again, now with a bet of 35, he's getting like 6-1 on his money. He's not going to be folding very often, so he's even going to peel hands like king, queen, 7-8, maybe a couple spades with a backdoor draw. He's not always going to have the entirety of that super wide range because maybe he's going to raise, but I feel like with the pot odds that he's getting, it's going to be very difficult for him to want to fold. King of Diamonds is a great card for us. It's not the best card because it does complete the flush, but we do now have top pair, which is a lot better than ace high. When it checks to us, this pot is big enough now. We're going to try to get to a river. We're just going to check it behind as well. This is a great river. I think if it checks to us, I'm probably going to be making a value bet. However, we don't get that opportunity as the cutoff jams about 125% of the pot. With the small blind checking both the turn and the river, I don't think that his hand is going to be very strong. I think the cutoff knows this as well. With me checking behind on the turn, it's very unlikely that I'm going to have a flush. That king could be a scare card for me as well. I think it's very, very likely that the cutoff is picking up on the weakness from both myself and the small blind and is trying to just steal his pot. Because I think his value hands recognize that we're both not very strong and we're probably not going to call a huge bet. So when the river pairs the board and he jams in 125% pot, his range is going to be more weighted toward hands that don't want to call than hands that do want to call. And like I said, he's going to have a lot of air hands in his range because of how he was enticed into this hand pre-flop, getting 3.3-1 and then getting 6-1. It's pretty tough to fold when you're getting those kind of odds and you think that you can outplay someone on the turn or river. So for all these reasons, I took about 2 or 3 minutes and eventually I made the call. Small blind folds, cutoff says good call, shows us queen 7 of spades. So our assessment of his range was correct. He did have a very wide range going into the flop, and then he called on the flop with just a backdoor flush draw and a gut shot because he was getting a great price for it. So I don't fault him for the way that he played that hand. He could have applied some pressure earlier on and probably taken down that pot, but he chose another route that just happened to get caught by a better hand. Under the gun, we pick up ace-queen offsuit, standard open for 10. Opponent to our immediate left makes it 30, and when it gets back around to us, everybody else is folded, so we have a decision to make. In the moment, I felt like this was a great hand to 4-bet with, although getting toward the end of the night, I do kind of get a little bit of gun shy because I don't want to lose a big pot right before I leave. I don't really like to win a big pot before I leave either, just because I don't want to feel like I'm hitting running. But anyway, for that reason alone, which is a pretty dumb reason, I decided to make the call. I think putting a 4-bet in here is the right play, although I'll be honest, I'm not too familiar with playing this deep in cash games. This is one area of my game that I am very excited to get better at because I think that's the weakest part of my game. Flop comes king high, and that card's a pretty good card for him to be repping. I check it over to him because he's the last aggressor, and he leads out for a bet of 35. At this point, I thought the right play was to call, mainly because I have the ace of spades and I can rep the nut flush if it does come spade spade. But to be honest, I'm just not comfortable enough yet to be making these kind of plays, and especially at 1-2, it can get you in a lot of trouble. Against the right opponents, which I think he is the right opponent to be doing this against, yes, it can be profitable, but also a lot of times you end up kicking yourself because you made some stupid high-level bluff at a 1-2 game where the guy was just like, well, I have a pair, I call. At 1-2, a way to have a great win rate is to just bet your hands when you have it and fold it when you don't. You can have better win rates by doing more advanced things, but if you do it too much and versus the wrong opponents, it can hurt you a lot and make you actually a losing player. I'm going to take the safe route here, lose my 30 bucks, and get on to the next hand. Now, I'll be honest, I included this hand just to have all of the player graphics on the screen. It was a good little bit of practice for me on the video editing side, and it lagged my computer quite a bit having all these animations going at once, so it was a little fun to do. And let's be honest, who doesn't love a family pot? A lot of times these hands just go limp, 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 and you see a cheap flop. King 8 suited's a good hand that can make a nut flush, can make some strong hands as well, so we're going to see a flop, hopefully catch something nice. Pretty exciting hand as everyone checks around. This turn's going to give us a little bit of excitement, and we're going to tickle the pot a little bit with a bet of 10 bucks. Believe it or not, that's actually going to do it, and it's going to wrap up this session. We're going to take down this last pot of the night and book a nice win. We played a couple more inconsequential hands that didn't make the cut and lost another 20 bucks. Overall, this was a great session. We had a lot of interesting hands. We were in for 300, cashed out for 865. Over the course of 4 hours, that's a profit of $565 for $114 an hour. We're one step closer to our goal, but I know it's going to be a long road getting there. Thanks again for watching. I hope you join me on the next one.